He looked on the verge of tears. "It's Patience," he managed, finally. "They want to find her a deuced husband."
"Blast and bugger their eyes," Patience muttered, yanking viciously at the apple blossom that shielded her from any prying eyes. She thought back to the events leading up to her current position high up in an apple tree on the edge of the vicarage's overgrown garden. The day had started so promisingly. She'd managed to convince her father and stepmother over breakfast to give her leave to take her sisters and brother to the Easter Day celebrations in the village. Once she'd obtained their permission, she'd gone on to suggest that she remove her younger siblings from the vicarage extra early to allow her father to focus all his energies on the spiritual mentorship of his flock on such an important day. So persuasive was her argument that she succeeded in making herself appear noble and self-sacrificing. In truth, she simply wanted to avoid Percy's interminable Easter sermon. The year before, it had lasted well over 2 hours, despite being read by her father at breakneck speed. Of course, Reverend Shackleford was perfectly aware of the true reason for his daughter's sudden altruism, but conscious that Patience could elucidate for hours to get her own way if needs be, he chose to surrender to the inevitable. There was also the added incentive that she'd undoubtedly go ahead and do it anyway, with or without his permission, and at least by conceding to her request, the Reverend could preserve the belief that he had at least a modicum of control over his determined daughter. Patience, on the other hand, didn't waste time wondering why her father had agreed. It was enough that he had. It was precisely as she was leaving the breakfast table that things had rapidly gone to hell in a handcart. She'd been busy filching some sweet rolls to eat later when a missive arrived from her sister Temperance. As Tempy had only months ago delivered of a baby boy whose lungs Patience was convinced already made him eligible to be a future town crier, she did not pay attention as her father began reading the message out loud. It was only as he faltered after a few moments, leaving a silence thick with unexpected dread, that Patience looked up from her pilfering with a frown. Indeed, the look of sheer horror on her father's face caused her to swallow with sudden anxiety as she glanced around the hushed table. But it was her stepmother Agnes's unexpected wail of despair that truly made her heart plummet down to her sturdy boots, though she still didn't fully understand the reason for it until the matron followed it up with a shriek of, "Do something, Augustus! If they so much as allow that hoyden within 100 miles of a London season, Antony will be spending the rest of his days as a... She paused to let out a sob before finishing in an appalled whisper, "Vicar!" Ignoring her stepmother's histrionics, Patience snatched the letter from her father's hands to read its contents for herself. It was far, far worse than she could ever have imagined. In it, Temperance announced her husband, the Earl of Ravenstone's, intention of sponsoring Patience for the coming season. The letter declared in no uncertain terms that their mother, God rest her soul, would turn in her grave if Patience was allowed to roam wild for much longer. The words she actually used were, for the most part, not commonly favoured by ladies, and certainly not ladies married to titled gentlemen. The letter finished with the avowal that both she and Grace intended to take it upon themselves to find their younger sister a husband. As soon as possible. Before they were all ruined. Well, she didn't actually write the last sentence, but Patience had no doubt that that was her meaning. Ignoring her stepmother's dramatic collapse onto the chaise longue, where Prudence was enthusiastically shoving salts up her nose, Patience lifted her eyes from the letter and allowed her horrified gaze to meet that of her equally horrified father. The Reverend's pallor was such that Patience was left in no doubt of his genuine terror at the thought of his first wife's youngest daughter being paraded before the ton. For a moment, she hadn't known whether to be relieved or...